A?
I'll get her.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, you're on.
I like the way you said that. Mike, you're on.
Good morning, City Council. Mike Schmid, Assistant City Attorney, here to discuss item 5, the workshop presentation on the enforcement solutions to illegal activities in massage establishments. A little background. The present situation that we have with the state of Florida, massage establishments and massage therapists are currently regulated under Chapter 40 of Florida statutes by the state Florida Department of Health. Massage establishments and therapists are also licensed by the Board of Massage. Information regarding these laws, applications, licensing can be seen by visiting the State of Florida Department of Health website. There's also a Board of Massage website. DOH and the Board of Massage are both here today. Part B was a request that we asked the Department of Health to appear. They are here. Both somebody from Tallahassee with regards to enforcement with Department of Health is here to speak, as well as somebody who oversees licensing with the Board of Massage is here to speak as well. They can give you a lot of background information with regards to massage establishments, regulating massage establishments, and permitting of both the massage establishments and the massage therapists. The issue that appears that City Council is trying to address in summation is how can the city better regulate massage establishments or other businesses such as spas that operate within the city and permit illegal acts of prostitution, solicitation for prostitution, lewdness, and may be encouraging some form of human trafficking. The present situation in the city is that Chapter 6 is titled Business Regulation. The city does not presently impose additional regulations on massage establishment and massage therapists. City Council has considered additional regulations in the past. I believe it was 2012, 2013 time period, approximately 5 years ago. But when the city was looking into this, so was the county. At that time, a state legislation was enacted and, in fact, has passed since that time. And the city and the county both elected to defer to the state legislation. One of the things City Council has been considering and legal has been asked to look into is bathhouses. Currently under Chapter 6, Division 4, the city does regulate bathhouses. Although currently there are no permits for bathhouses presently in the city and the ordinance is not currently being enforced. The current definitions under bathhouse that are of importance is the definitions of bath, bathhouse, and bath technician. As you can see in these definitions, they are quite extensive. So what we are looking into with the legal department is figuring out the best way to go about revising these definitions for the current situation that the city is facing.
Chair, before you move that, if I could ask one quick question.
Yes, sir.
Under bath, it says, as part of it, after vapor or steam, it says including but limited to, or is it but not limited to? Is that, are you missing a not in there?
I think there should be a not.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yes, correct.
All right, okay, because it seems weird to have that in there, that you're limiting it, even though it's usually a not in there. So
I feel certain there has to be a not.
I do too.
If there wasn't a not, then there should have been a not.
Okay, great. I want to make sure.
Got it. Thank you.
Some considerations for City Council is massage establishments and technicians are presently regulated and licensed, as we've spoken about, by the state. Majority of massage establishments within the city do not appear to have any illegal activity known at the massage establishment or by a massage technician. Chapter 480 provides for investigation of the massage establishment, the required license process, examinations, inspections, fees, disciplinary action, advertisement restrictions, prohibited practice, civil and criminal penalties, and also requires documentation. And again, Department of Health here and Board of Massage Therapy is here to explain more about 480 and as well as 456, the licensing component. Chapter 480.052, another consideration that City Council needs to consider is the language in there that talks about regulations by county and municipalities, and there's one line in there. It says, regulations by county and municipalities shall not exceed the powers of the state under this act or be inconsistent with this act. So if we regulate massage establishments or technicians, of course the city needs to be mindful of that. Now, one thing we've talked about is the idea of, instead of massage establishments or massage technicians, regulating or permitting bathhouses that are not regulated by the state or permitted or licensed by the state. The city has a public health, safety, welfare concern in ensuring all bathhouses are sanitary and diseases are not spread. Additionally, the legal department's understanding that prior to any illegal sexual act at a certain massage establishment or a spa, it is common for the patron to be offered a bath, shower, or cleansing as a precursor act to the solicitation of prostitution, and that this may be one avenue that we can go after trying to address the situation. A revision to the city bathhouse ordinance would allow the city to regulate bathhouses through local permitting, inspections to ensure bathhouses are sanitary, to prohibit the offering of baths as a precursor act to solicitation of prostitution, and to allow the state to continue regulating businesses operating solely as massage establishments. If a business elects to operate as a massage establishment and as a bathhouse, the bathhouse would need to comply with both the state and the city law. So a new bathhouse ordinance or revisions to the bathhouse ordinance, we would need to consider, of course, the three major following things. First, how we are going to administer of the permit process, the enforcement of the ordinance, and of course, the legality of the ordinance. And of course, my focus is to look at the legality of the ordinance. So not only draft it, but make sure all the components of it can be defended in the drafting process. In trying to appear before you today, I have started just at least a rough draft so I can identify possible issues and look into legal concerns that we might have. I can tell you it's, by the time you draft something as comprehensive as a bathhouse ordinance, it's probably 20 sections. Every single word needs to be considered and critiqued. And so it will be a process, but we are working on it, and we are meeting with the administration, with the city, and also trying to consider the enforcement of the ordinance. But that's what the concerns are going forward with a new bathhouse ordinance. Some of the recommendations we're looking into for City Council include the narrowing of the definitions I showed City Council earlier, and the application so that the ordinance can address the current issue of ensuring sanitary conditions as well as prohibiting the solicitation activities that may be occurring at these baths. Typically, these places are advertising either as a massage establishment or a spa. We need to determine who will administer and enforce the ordinance. We need to hear from the community for feedback once an ordinance is drafted. We need to allow administration to consider how the present business will be notified about this permitting process. And we need time for businesses and technicians to come into compliance. And then, of course, we need an enforcement method, and City Council could consider possibly allowing for abatement under the public nuisance abatement for violations of the division. Some possible standards that we're considering in the bathhouse ordinance would be requiring a permitting and posting for a bathhouse and bathhouse technician, a detailed application and inspection process, a designation of a bathhouse manager, considering limitation of the hours, requirements to ensure sanitary conditions of the premises, requirements that bath technicians be uniformed, requiring a posting of prices and services, customer registration and payment log, having them turn off their signage at closing, and requiring customers use designated entries that faces the street. The next step then would be to request legal and administration to come back to the City Council after we've heard from public comments and others, present draft language, and with that, I'm here to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilman Suarez.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, thank you so much for putting this together. It is yeoman's work when you have to go look and find something that is an old ordinance that has not been used. It was put on the books for a particular reason, a different reason than what we're looking at now. Bathhouses were used primarily for homosexual encounters primarily, and that after the AIDS epidemic started, many of the AIDS activists had said you need to regulate these more in order to make sure the spread of the disease does not continue. But I like your thinking in terms of using this as a method to go towards the massage therapy or massage parlors that are out there. Part of the reason is you hit on it perfectly. The precursor to the sexual act, in order to make sure that when you are there as a quote-unquote John that comes in, to make sure that you are not a police officer, typically they ask you to remove your clothes so they can, scrub you down, okay? And they do that and say, we're going to bathe you first before anything happens. They do that, obviously, because it's a precursor to making sure that they are not being, they're not being monitored by a police officer or someone else, so that they can go forward and do the act without any kind of problem of repercussion or arrest. Now, for me, I think that this is a great way to try and tackle the major issues that we have with massage parlors. Right now, we do not have a way of enforcing what is available to us because of these type of things. Police officers don't have the ability to show themselves as a nude individual in front of these folks because it totally throws out their enforcement mechanism in terms of what they're going to do when they present a case. You cannot be both a police officer and look as if you are about to have sex or get a sexual act performed on you by someone. So they know that they have a very difficult job when it comes to trying to catch these folks out there. To me, I think that we've been going around in a lot of different circles concerning, people that are living there, making sure that, people that are being human trafficked here, that are being forced to stay there, it's much more difficult to catch them as if they were living there. And how we enforce that is extremely hard. We can't do that. So this, I think, might really have a cooling off on those people that are going to the facilities. I like the fact that to log in before you go in there, that you have to go into a entrance facing the street, that you have to essentially be dressed as a technician and not as, as a lot of these places are bordellos, essentially. So to me, I think that you're trying to find the best of both worlds. Now, in terms of the change to the ordinance itself, I noticed that it has to have that component of cleansing or washing or showers or something like that. How difficult do you think that's going to be based on your knowledge and communication with TPD as to how many of these establishments might be affected by this particular type of rule? And of course, you will have to change it and make it a little bit different in order to accommodate these massage parlors.
I believe by narrowing the definition of bath that's out there now to include the human torso for one would be one suggestion, so that way a facial wouldn't meet the definition, and I think that will help alleviate some of the concerns out there. But the other concerns will have to be that we will draft a definition of the term bath and float it out to the massage establishments as well as the therapists, and I believe there's the Florida local chapter of the Florida Massage Therapists, and they're actually here today, and I had sent an email also inviting them to speak with me because I would like to work with them and make sure we get a definition that isn't catching anybody in the net that we don't intend to catch, but obviously there has to be some form of a definition of bath that allows us to regulate these places to ensure that this activity is not occurring.
And correct me if I'm wrong, some of the definitions in the bathhouse is the exposure of genitalia to the customer themselves. Part of the reason why the uniform was required is that you're not going to expose yourself to the person that you are that you are actually performing a massage on, and that kind of creates that change. And I think that most legitimate massage facilities and establishments, they are in uniforms typically. They are in a particular type of garb that is specific to massage therapists and not to people that are going to perform sex acts. And I think that definition and that delineation between the two, I think, is extremely important. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was part of the bathhouse ordinance also, some part of the definition concerning what you're able to wear as a person in a bathhouse. And I know that it's part of the massage. It's not essentially part of the massage ordinance, but it is part of the other ordinance. So I think that we should keep that and make sure that we go forward. In addition, I think that, and this is something I have not asked you before, and it's something that was brought up to me afterwards, and since it's not a part of Part B or Part C, I want to ask about this particularly. In terms of the enforcement mechanism, if someone is arrested for prostitution, typically is that a felony, do you know? Because I know that you've had some experience in terms of, prosecuting. No, well, you understand this well enough that that you understand what the penalties are out there.
It would be a misdemeanor offense.
And a misdemeanor offense. I think that after a certain number of misdemeanors, there may be, a threshold.
It can be enhanced, correct.
I'm sorry?
Yes, I believe there is enhancements for prostitution.
One of the things that I have talked to some other members of the public, in particular Dottie Groover Skipper, who is with the Salvation Army, they're trying to get people out of prostitution and trying to help some of the women that are caught in a situation where people are holding them against their will, and they have no contact with anyone outside of the madams or the pimps that are actually running these facilities. And I know that they're talking currently with the chief judge to find out about how they can have a diversion court specifically for prostitution. What I suggested, and something that they were in agreement with, is that maybe finding a way that they would have to take a course specific to prostitution and human trafficking. That way, those folks that are involved might want to teach that course or be certified to teach that course, to give them options outside of the fact that they are working in a bordello, masquerading as a massage therapy place. And in that way, we can probably stem the tide of women that are part of this industry and get them out of it. It is not going to stop it. Obviously, there are always people that they're going to traffic. There are always people that they're going to have in order to go forward. But if we could find a way to get them away from it so that they understand that you're going to have to be exposed, literally, to people that might want to talk to you about how to escape this process, I guarantee you that those folks that are running these facilities are going to think twice about what they're doing. And I think that in conjunction with all the other things you put forward is a great double-edged sword that we can use against it. So I would like for you to go back and look at that. I'll make a motion later on to that effect to say this is something we want to look at when we talk about the enforcement of it. Because it's not enough to arrest people, take them out, and then they're going to go right back in after a few days, or in another location, or spread out throughout the rest of the state of Florida. It's not enough to stop it here. And I know my friends from Clean Up Kennedy are here. It's not about cleaning up Kennedy. It's about cleaning up Tampa. I have no problem with the Clean Up Kennedy phrase, but it is about cleaning up the rest of the city, because the shell game that's played with these ladies and with these facilities, we cannot keep up with them. So we need to have a strong enforcement mechanism and a way for these women to have an out, so that we reduce the supply of people that are sex workers for them, that we make it more expensive for them to go out and get more folks, as opposed to being extremely cheap and moving these folks around. So we need to look at that also. But Mike, thanks so much for finding this. I would not have known about this ordinance. I don't think anybody on council or anyone in this administration would have known about this ordinance had you not went in and looked at this and found a way for us to actually use this for our enforcement mechanism. So I appreciate that.
Yes,
thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else? Mr. Vera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to thank my colleague, Councilman Suarez, for his leadership on this issue, and he touched on something that I think is really important, which is what happens after we pass this ordinance, which, goodness willing, we will. We're going to have to talk about maybe clean up Bush, clean up Fowler, clean up Hillsborough Avenue, clean up MLK, et cetera, et cetera. There's supply and demand. This is the ugly side of free enterprise, isn't it? In its worst form. The folks who want to make money off of exploitation and off of human trafficking know that there's a demand. So these greedy people, these bad people, these evil people are going to try to get the supply. Councilman Suarez's reference to a diversion court working with Chief Judge Figueroa for prostitutes and those accused of prostitution, I think that is a great idea. I think that the people in this room are going to be part of the what's next focus. After we, God willing, pass a good ordinance that cleans up this issue, we've got to take a look at groups like Clean Up Kennedy. I see my friends here from the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking. I went to one of their ribbon cuttings recently on one of their wonderful safe houses for young boys. Very, very emotional experience just going there and seeing that room. We got to take a look at our churches, our civic organizations, our neighborhoods, different charities, etc. Maybe even think about creating some sort of if one's not around already, a Tampa Citizens Commission on Human Trafficking to keep an eye on this issue, because again, it's supply and it's demand. And supply and demand is a great thing in many ways, but it can also serve as an indicator of some really, really bad things. So I think that what Councilman Suarez was referencing is a good idea.
Thank you. Let me ask you a couple of questions. First of all, let me just say that I'm glad that we're discussing this, because this entire situation is a complete embarrassment to the city, and it should be an embarrassment, and we should be concerned about it, because it's not only unacceptable and immoral and illegal, but it really makes us appear to be something that we're not. And when I say something that we're not, it makes us appear to be an overly permissive, somehow out of control city, and that really isn't what we are. You brought us, you said you're working on an ordinance. You showed us some bullet points of different things that you think need to be regulated as part of it. What are the specific policy directions that you need from us in order to complete your work? Are there any specific policy issues that you need council to clarify its intent on, so that when you are working through this, you'll know what the views are of the board?
That is a great question, and I appreciate it. The first thing is not necessarily from council. It's that we have been trying to work with the administration and make sure we understand how this is going to be administered if City Council wants to go this path. And so there is going to be a time component with truly understanding that in order to make this effective, we have to have an effective permitting and administrative process. Right now we are looking at having one department do the administration, and that's what we're still in the process of figuring out. And
who are you looking at having do it right now?
Well, I think Kathy Coyle's here, and she might be the best one to speak about that, because that's what we've been trying to hammer out these details, but of course we've all been
So what you're saying is you expect that this would be something that would be handled through land development coordination?
I think so. I think that's where we're going with this. But then they would be responsible for the ensuring the permitting applications are received, all the details are received, then sending it over possibly to Tampa Police Department, which is obviously who I also have to make sure it is on board. But then Tampa Police Department will be in charge of doing the background checks, making sure the information on the application is truthful, and then sending it back within a certain time period back for final approval by administration to then say, okay, now you've been approved, and now you need to come in and pay your actual permit fee. Here's your permit, at which point TPD will also be doing inspections on these places. So that's sort of where it's sort of a bifurcated system where administration's overlooking, possibly land development is looking at making sure the permits are done, and TPD is making sure the inspections and everything else is in place and is actually checking in on these places.
And you mentioned the Public Nuisance Abatement Board at one point. How are they involved in this?
As of now, they're not. But it is another avenue that we could consider is allowing this to qualify as something for public nuisance abatement. We would have to figure out going back into Chapter 14 and adding that in.
Let me say that I agree with what Councilman Suarez said, that this is a very, very good way of approaching this problem. What is the only way, however, that this is going to work is if we have the resources for enforcement. Too many times we have passed ordinances here to regulate behavior that admittedly is not as egregious as this, but is still behavior that we're trying to prevent, and we fail at our mission because we are not effectively enforcing the ordinances. In some cases, it's because we don't have the resources to. It's not because we don't want to. This, though, is really going to require a resource commitment in order to be effective. And I think that the first step toward getting a dedicated resource commitment is understanding exactly what the process is going to be that's going to be followed. I'm sure that Councilman Suarez mentioned that he was going to make a motion. I'm sure when he does that, he will incorporate in the council's grave concern that this be placed at the absolute highest priority of enforcement in the city. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. Any additional information?
Just a quick question, Chair. Are we going to do public comment for all three parts after they're all done, or are we going to do it on an individual basis? I assume we're going to do it until after everything else is done. Is that correct?
That's the way I was going to do it, but we can do it otherwise.
No. I
if
just
everyone agrees.
want to make sure. I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
So we have Part A. Are we on Part B?
We're on Part B.
Part B now. Thank you. That is Department of Health.
Good morning. Mark Whitten. I'm the Chief Bureau of Enforcement for the Department of Health. And I have with me Will Spooner. He's a program administrator with the Board of Massage. I'll let Will do a licensure overview for you. I'll give some enforcement numbers. Then we'll, of course, answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Good morning. We license massage therapists and massage establishments in the Board of Massage Therapy. Every single massage therapist in the state of Florida is required to have a background check done by a live scan, and that live scan checks for all kinds of criminal history, and the same with massage establishment owners. The same thing is required for them. So that process helps to weed out people who have unsavory history. Each case is handled on a case-by-case basis, and there are certain statutes that require us to deny a license. Anyone who has a kidnapping offense or anything egregious like that is required to be denied for licensure. But every other case is handled on a case-by-case basis.
Those fingerprints are retained, so if there is an arrest, we'll get a hit for that arrest, and the board office will be able to review that to determine what action to take, and then refer that to enforcement.
Would it be accurate to say that the people that we are talking about here, the issues that we are talking about here, for the most part probably exist entirely outside of your regulatory control, that they're not going to come in and apply for a license through the process, right?
We get very few people who would be denied applying for a license. Our information is out there for anyone to know that they could be denied based on that information. It's in the application so that they know not to waste their money and their time applying for a license. So, yes, most people who have history like that not even bother applying for a license.
And what we do see is the unlicensed activity. And I can give you some enforcement numbers trying to cover some of that if you'd like. Over the last 9 months, the Tampa Investigative Services Unit has conducted 11 operations. Six of those with the Tampa Police Department. Of the 11 operations, 9 resulted in 29 cases being opened. And over the last 2 fiscal years, we have conducted approximately right under 2,300 inspections, establishment inspections in Tampa, and which resulted in 139 unlicensed activity cases. So we do at times find licensees engaging in this activity, but primarily it is unlicensed individuals. Now, when our inspectors go in and they identify, hey, there's possibly something happening here, the folks that are there are not going to perform those activities with a state inspector there. We can send undercover investigators in. But as stated earlier, it's very difficult. Our investigators they're not sworn and they cannot fully disrobe. And that's kind of a disqualifier sometimes. So these undercover operations, they're very difficult. The people we're dealing with are very savvy, very organized. And we just go out there and we hit them as frequently as possible. But what we also find is when we go back in, it's not the same people there. They move around. So we're always chasing moving targets.
Councilman Suarez.
Yes. Can I ask a couple questions? It's possible, though, for somebody to have had a prostitution arrest or conviction and still have a license, because you don't go back and look at licensure every year, correct? Or do you?
When in 2014, the requirement for fingerprinting went into effect, and it was retroactive. So it required anyone who was previously licensed to also be screened.
Okay.
So we are also checking for that. And it is also, as you said, prints are retained. So they are constantly being checked for more history, yes.
How many have you caught, or how many that you know of? I don't know if you know this answer off the bat. So, this is an unfair process for us because we get to ask you questions that you may not know the answer to. That's nothing new on this council, okay? Have you checked to see how many people that are that were currently licensed also have a conviction for prostitution in your database? Have you looked at that and seen what those numbers are?
No, it's something we could go back and check.
Okay.
Anytime that there's a criminal violation that the board office cannot clear, which the board office can typically clear minor violations over a long span of time,
Sure.
they would go before the full board. So it would be a matter of public record at that point.
So the process is, if let's say for an example, we had a sting here for the Tampa Police Department. They caught someone that was engaging in sexual activity, illegal sexual activity on the premises. And they were licensed. Okay, that process then would be, look, we're reporting to you saying that they are now either convicted or have an arrest for prostitution. That goes back to the board then, right?
What would happen is, even if they didn't report it to us, we'd get a hit.
Okay.
Through either the FDLE or FBI.
Right.
And they're typically pretty fast at us receiving those hits. We would receive that information. We would open an enforcement case. Of course, they would have to be convicted.
Right.
And then we would move forward. And after the investigation was concluded, we would provide it to the board.
So if they are arrested, that process would start because they send you a notice that a massage therapist, a licensed massage therapist, has been caught up in this particular activity, and that you would know right away as soon as they've been arrested or in the adjudication phase of the process, correct?
We have analysts in our consumer services section that monitor for those hits, and they will open a preliminary investigation and review that and continually check the database. And as soon as there is a conviction or if it's closed out, we'll know to either close the case or proceed with investigation.
How often do you audit in terms of going back and looking at these folks that are licensed? Because one of the things, and I know you know this, is that people will get a license. Typically, they will be people that might be of Asian descent. They play a game in which, oh no, that's really me. I look differently now, and we know, and this is actually a fact. People that are of different races have a problem recognizing other races in terms of the changes or differences. It's much more difficult. So you might see a bad photograph or a photograph of somebody that's a massage therapist, and it actually is not the person that you're arresting, or they're using someone else's license to say, no, I'm licensed, I'm supposed to be here, that type of thing. So have you found any of those kind of fraudulent activity in relation to your licensing?
You can find that in any profession. Yes.
Well, I understand that. I'm just saying, we're asking only about your licensing procedure, that's all.
Yes, we do. When inspectors go out, you're going to be looking for, typically these inspectors go to the same facilities year after year after year.
Right.
You get to know the folks that are the mainstays within these establishments. So you know what they look like. And if you believe that the photo has been, or the license has been altered, you can ask for identification. And if you still have concerns, send it to headquarters and we'll open a case. and we'll go out there undercover. We'll try to get additional information from them because they're going to have employment information on file, pay stubs, things of that nature. We can find out who they are.
Do you have any other requirement that they have to have any other kind of license, like a driver's license or any other kind of license?
Is it under the
I mean,
requirement?
to verify their own identity at these times.
We do request identification. We're on site. We're not sure who you are, or if you tell us, no, I'm not licensed and I'm not working, well, I need to see an ID.
Right.
And we'll jot down their name just in case we see them.
But you don't cross-reference in terms of like their license for their licensing, and also any kind of identification either from the state or from any other thing, a passport or green card or anything like that.
We require a social security number when we do initial licensure, and our system does cross-check across other professions that are medical professions. So if they have a license in any other profession that they may possibly have had discipline in, for instance, the CNA, we would know that as well.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Maybe you can anticipate Part C just by me standing here. A request was made, and we don't have anything to present on Part C.
Thank you.
And Chair, if I could, so did you requested FBI or ICE or anyone else about this particular part, and they did not present anything to you, or?
A request was made by an officer to federal agents, and they did not wish to respond and reply, come here today. Yes, correct.
They did not wish to respond, or they just didn't respond?
They did not. They did not agree to come.
They chose not to respond.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that, no, we can't because I have a conflict or something. It's just they didn't answer. They said, yeah, we're not going to come.
That's basically, yes, correct.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you, Mr. Schmid. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
So that's the end of Part C for
Yeah.
now. All right. The public wish to address us on item 5, Part A, B, or C.
For Council, I'm Joseph Manson, 2308 South Lionel Lane, and I just want to thank you so much for making this a priority and addressing this and deploying all these assets in order to tackle this problem. This is a problem that many of us here in Tampa care about. I walk, and I talk to the business owners on Kennedy. I talk to people who live nearby on Kennedy. I talk to people at church. I talk to people at the grocery store. I talk to people wherever I go. And pretty much everyone I talk to here in Tampa, this is an issue that they've known about for a while and that they care about a lot. So I know you heard the term silent majority, but this is the silent super majority. People all across Tampa care about this and are behind you guys going forward on this. And I'm really hopeful about this bathhouse ordinance and doing that. If it doesn't have the desired outcome, we'll come back and we'll do something else. So I just want to let you know that the public will is here and it's behind you on this issue. Councilman Vieira was talking about supply and demand. There's another aspect to economics, is barrier to entry. Right now here in Tampa, it's very easy to operate one of these businesses, and we see that because there's so many of them. So we need to create legal and city things so to raise that barrier of entry so it's harder for them to open and harder for them to operate here in Tampa, these illicit businesses. I just want to thank everyone who came out to support Clean Up Kennedy. If you want to throw up a hand or something like that. I know we got some T-shirts and some non-T-shirts. We have a whole bunch of organizations here. I know Polaris has come down from D.C. We have the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking. I know, I think I saw some representatives from Created, which is a great organization that works with women who are coming out of the commercial sexual industry, and they're really good about caring about the women. So I just hope that everybody is able to speak and comes up here and talks, because we have a whole bunch of great people in the building today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Rochelle Cahan, and I am the Director of Disruption Strategies at Polaris from D.C. We have been following this from the media and are so heartened to see Tampa taking such a proactive step towards eliminating the trafficking that happens in the massage industry here. I want to bring a little bit of national context for you. We're tackling this issue at a national level, and we estimate around 9,000 illicit massage businesses across the United States. Florida is a top three state for in terms of the volume. New York and California are the first two. And most of the people initially trafficked into New York and California are recruited to then come to Florida. Florida is a major nexus, not only to help get the massage licensing for them to attempt to legitimately traffic these women, but also to then funnel them across the rest of every city on the I-95 corridor. Florida taking it seriously could have ripple effects for the entire country, and we're so proud to see Tampa being the lead in Florida on this issue. And I want to echo a lot of what Joe Manson says in all of his interviews and just really thank everyone wearing a blue shirt in here today. It's exciting to watch you guys on the news all of the time, that this is human trafficking, and that the focus on the women and emphasizing whether or not the women are licensed empowers the traffickers. We need to emphasize the people who are controlling those women and profiting off of those women, and so we need to emphasize the legitimacy of the business itself and the legitimacy of the licensing itself. We're working with national massage industry across the country as well as a bunch of local affiliates, because not regulating this well also leads to unsafety for legitimate massage therapists. Right now, Tampa's massage ordinance is listed under adult businesses as opposed to a legitimate business. That already puts them at a disadvantage. We would ask that instead of emphasizing this bathhouse ordinance, especially if you need a lot of amendments already, that you amend your massage ordinance and first and foremost put it under a legitimate category, call it a legitimate industry, and then regulate out anyone that's abusing this industry so that you can protect massage therapists from getting sexually assaulted, as well as you can protect women from being trafficked within these industries. We're working with over 25 partners this year already amending their ordinances. That's been at city levels. 3 of them have been at the state level. We've advised we can provide as much support as needed. We can also step back. We can connect you to the people who've done this at the state level, at the city level. We have tons of research, a lot of resources we can provide for you, and you're a top 3 state, and so you'll get support from us because it's important and it'll have ripple effects across the country. I could probably talk for an hour, so I'll just stop now. But we also have a lot of specifics on the Florida state ordinance that does regulate massage as a legitimate industry, and the 2D section of that allows, as the home rule probably knows, for you to go even further and do even better, and then you can lead in doing that for this state, and we would be happy to help you do that.
Thank you. Any questions for?
Oh, yeah.
Councilman.
The only thing, I want to congratulate you for being here. You know, we've talked a few months ago, and I'm glad that you realize how tough our sunshine law is. She wanted to share some information with me. She said, but don't share it with anyone else. I said, well, if you send me an email, it's with everyone else. So thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate the work that Polaris does. You were one of the starting points for me when I started looking at this process and understanding what it means in terms of across the country and how to actually fight it. Some of the things we've already done, but some of the things that we can continue to do and some of the suggestions you made, we really appreciate. Thanks so much.
Councilman VR.
I just wanted to mention that it's interesting that the other states along with Florida are, I believe it was California and New York. I mean, 3 states that have a great history of immigration, obviously. And I would not be surprised if close behind those states are Texas and Arizona, states that also have a lot of immigration, because this is also an immigrants' rights issue, because a lot of these...
Sorry.
Oh, no.
Texas and Illinois are the next 2.
Illinois, okay. Well, I was right on one of them, right? But this is also an immigrants' rights issue, because a lot of immigrants come from all over the world here seeking the American dream, and instead they get the American nightmare. So this is also an immigrants' rights issue. So thank you for your work.
If I can just offer on to all of you, we're working with nearly 80 law enforcement jurisdictions in this country and providing them support to help shift away from arresting the women and towards organized crime, providing them the resources and the sort of national trend level information that I just provided to you. And we would be happy to provide that to Tampa. And what Councilmember Suarez was talking about was that conversation that it's obviously tactical information that we don't want just publicly released everywhere, but we would be happy to have a conversation with them outside of the television. So if that comes up in conversation, we would be happy to extend those resources as well.
Councilman Suarez, one moment.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is a legal question for the legal department. So what Councilmember Vieira brought up, immigration, came to my mind that what if you had to have a green card to participate as a possible employee, because a lot of immigrants that come in don't get a green card till at least they're here 2 years. That might stream some of the stream of those that are being abused going into the system.
It could, but I also want to strongly emphasize that the traffickers, one major form of control is if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to call the cops or get you deported. So in a way, it could lead to empowering the traffickers. So I'm not saying that that's the wrong answer, but just really think through that it's a major form of control is deportation, because many of the women are either smuggled directly to the country or they're being exploited because of their immigration status. So it's especially vulnerability in this type of trafficking.
Well, I hate to disagree with you kindly, because
Okay.
if you had to have a green card, they can't use that against you. If you're an immigrant, you have a green card, yeah, they can tell you that. But if you have a green card, then the thing changes a little bit, doesn't it?
Possibly. I would just say that it's a little not so simple, but
I
yes.
understand. Thank you.
And during my motion, I'll make sure that our legal department can meet with you and with TPD to make sure that you can work out some of the issues and some of the suggestions that you might have for our police department and some of the enforcement parts of it.
Thank you. And we
My
do have
pleasure.
specific ordinance support as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Ed Toulouse. I already gave my whereabouts, but most important on this issue is that I used to be working for Maryland Department of Health. Now, this is obviously not any official position of the Maryland Department of Health, because I was like out of control. I was supposed to say rigidly focused on sewer, water, and storm drains, and when HIV/AIDS started to come along, I got intrigued with it, and in fact later I went and got a master's in public health so I could work closer with issues of that sort. But at that end of our floor, the people that dealt with clinical issues were at the other end of the floor. But they took care of that because they never honored my leave of absence. Hey, you get a leave of absence to go back to school studying what you're supposed to be knowing, and then they don't honor your leave of absence. So you do pay a price. Anyway, what bears on this a little bit, this is typically very much a Coney Island issue. And my great-grandfather, he was listed in court papers as a saloon keeper because the plaintiff was an ex-mayor of New York, so my great-grandfather didn't stand much chance on that. But he also rented out bathing suits, so he had to have a changing room. In fact, actually, in those days, 2 changing rooms. I guess still 2 changing rooms. And what happened was it was beachfront. Now, in Baltimore, there was a bathhouse, and it was on a corner, and there was no beach around. So it was obviously something else. People were not changing into swimsuits to go swimming. And I got one of my dates, and we went there, and it was, what do you mean she can't come in? Well, this is a men's thing. Well, there's sex discrimination, and so on and so forth. But really, worse than the bathhouses, I thought, was male prostitution. And there were streets in Baltimore where there were lots of male prostitutes, as Nebraska Avenue is slipping back into. You have the resources to deal with these things, but you seem to be more focused on people coming from the other side of the planet than people from here. Now, this is something Tommy Daniels could get on if he wasn't always straying all over here and everywhere. There's all these women who are from here on Nebraska Avenue, and the numbers are increasing all the time in the absence of law enforcement because it's all being drained off to Kennedy that I don't really see much of a problem. So anyway, that's something to file away because traffic laws, a woman got hit by a turning car and killed the other day. So traffic laws are not the only thing that are being weakly enforced in Tampa. There's also and an arrest record is not a conviction record. That's very important. Suspicion of assault and robbery. I was snatched off the street and taken in, and I have an arrest record for suspicion of assault and robbery. I think you know I wasn't ever guilty of assault and robbery, but that's an arrest. And there was never a conviction because it was ridiculous. So, but it's hard to trace that. It's very easy to trace an arrest record.
Thank you, sir.
And very hard to trace a conviction record. So most of the time, an arrest record is a conviction.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. My name is Joanna Diebel. I'm with Created Women, an organization that's been here in Tampa for officially 10 years now. We have been reaching out to women who have any kind of sexual exploitation, involvement in the sex industry. We started off with just doing street outreach, but we now have a residential house. We're trying to do a transitional house as well for 30 days, and we do classes at drug treatment centers. Part of the reason why I'm here today is to be a voice and a resource to you as you're going forward with your actions with the massage parlors. Part of meeting up with Dottie Skipper and Councilman Suarez that we would like to be a resource and able to help out with any kind of prostitution diversion class, and even a John's school for educational purposes for our city. Our main goal is to be able to assist the women, and we're mostly just wanting to see that there's some kind of infrastructure for the women who are going to be affected by those laws coming in, especially if they have been trafficked, either labor trafficked or fallen into this for some reason. Each woman has a different story. There's also a language barrier. I would just wish to be able to put our name out there that we would like to see that infrastructure for the women, and if we can help in any way as well with that, especially when it's concerning for them to get a misdemeanor or deported. And so I just wanted to come in here today to say that.
Thank you.
My name is Doug Manson, and I'm the legal team of Clean Up Tampa. I might also be related to some of the folks at Clean Up Tampa. But I'm an administrative lawyer. It's mainly what I do in my profession. I'm familiar with some of you in the council. And first, I want to thank you for not only paying attention to this issue, but emphasizing this issue and prioritizing for the City of Tampa. I'm a longtime resident of the City of Tampa as well, and I think it's a blight. And to go along with what you said, Clean Up Tampa, Clean Up Kennedy is just the start. It goes to Clean Up Tampa, Clean Up Florida, Clean Up the United States, and end human trafficking worldwide. We have to start somewhere, so we're starting here. I wanted to say I've worked and had some conversations with Mike Schmid going on through this. He's done a fantastic job. This is a hard area to regulate. It's a difficult place because you do have a very just a moving target. You have a very savvy group of people that are figuring out a way to make money and get around the regulations. So it's one in which you have to be able to put a thoughtful process that Mike has in trying to come up with a way of doing that. Some of the other things we discussed, and I heard Councilman Miranda mention it as well, but a slightly different take on that would be an identification card, that everyone that works at these facilities would have to wear an identification card. The reason being, it would have a photograph, and they had to register with the City of Tampa. By doing that, they'd have to show some form of identification here, and it's an easy enforcement mechanism. Is everybody registered and you go in? Does everybody have their ID tag? And I loved what they had before. You're wearing scrubs instead of lingerie. You know, you're closing down these places by 10 o'clock in the evening or sometime like that. But using the bath ordinance, modifying it, broadening it so they could cover these places, many of which, you're right, do not have licensed massage therapists affiliated with them. So basically what I wanted to say is thank you what you've done before, thank you what you're continuing to do and how you're prioritizing this, and then specifically to thank Mike Schmid for the good work that he's done on it, and I know he's going to have a lot more work to do. And we'll work with you to try to find a way, and I know the most difficult thing is coming up with a funding source to be able to ensure continued enforcement in the long term, not just one burst of it and then other budget priorities take over. So that's the other way, through fees of these registration, maybe make it self-sustaining. But thank you for your time and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Doug, if I may, on another subject matter, I just want to thank you. You were, when I was a young guy, I had long hair, not that you're old. You were back in 1998, you were one of the couple of individuals that took me under your wing and gave me an education on water. You're very familiar with all that. I want to thank you publicly. And also, I agree with you on identification. That is not something that's not enforceable and not unlawful, because the Department of Business and Professional Regulation does that at any racetrack that you're employed by. You have to have an identification card to move from one area to the other area. No matter where you're at, once you go into the grounds, you must have an identification card to get in, or they will not let you in. But I know it works. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good suggestion. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Alex Bassoff, and thank you for this moment. I am the owner of Suncoast Massage Therapy Center, along with my wife, and we started that 28 years ago on Kennedy Boulevard. We were the first establishment to have massage in our name when we started on Kennedy Boulevard. This seems like deja vu because 5 years ago we were going through a similar thing when I met with Councilman Suarez back then, and we were talking about it. I've been legislative chair for the State Massage Association off and on for about 15 years. Out of the 40 years I've been practicing massage. One of the things that addressing it this way is through the bathhouse regulation would be a good starting point. But the one thing that we're not looking at is on the demand side of it. In our society, in economics, there's the supply and demand. And only I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Swedish model of how they've dealt with some of the prostitution and human trafficking, but they've gone after the demand side by making it illegal to purchase sexual favors, not just prosecuting the people that sell it. So you may want to look in consideration something along those lines too, because that would cut down on the supply side. On the demand side. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address us on our workshop item number 5? Is she coming? You coming up to speak? Yes.
I've never done this before.
Thank you. Your name?
My name is Natalie Keene, and I'm with the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking. And I just wanted to stand up here briefly and thank you all for what you're doing and all the efforts that you're putting into fighting this issue here in our city, as well as all the other organizations who are here as well. And we just want to be a resource and a support to you in any way that we can provide that. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else wish to address us on item 5? Seeing none? Yes, sir.
Chair, I'd like to make some motions concerning this so that Mr. Schmid can have some direction. Mr. Schmid, if you want to come on up with your pen sharpened, your pencil sharpened, we're ready to go, okay? First, I'd like to make a motion that Mr. Schmid and the legal department draft an ordinance using the bathhouse ordinance itself as I guess it would be a foundation for massage establishment enforcement.
Second.
Okay. I'm going to try and do some separate ones instead of doing parts.
All right.
So.
We have a motion by Councilman Suarez, second by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
All right. I'd like to also request the legal department speak with Polaris concerning how to approach humane treatment of victims of trafficking when we are enforcing a new ordinance once it's created.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Suarez, second by Councilman Cohen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. No, continue.
And I would like the legal department to also discuss with the chief judge of any diversion court that might be created, how we might be a part of that, the city of Tampa would be a part of that, and to reach out to organizations like Created and any other organization that might be concerned with teaching the dangers of human trafficking, and so that those courses, we may even want to craft it so that, and find the legal reasoning for this, craft it so that the cost of that, they'd have to pay for it, and that cost can help towards the enforcement of the ordinance itself.
Second. We have a motion by Councilman Suarez, second by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And lastly, in addition, that we, for any enforcement mechanism that we come through, that it be a priority with TPD or with code enforcement, whichever organization, whichever department is going to handle the enforcement, that it be a priority for them when they go out and look at these ordinances being broken.
Second. We have a motion by Councilman Suarez, second by Councilman Cohen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Anything else, sir?
I think that's enough.
That's enough. Okay, good. Thank you. With that, we proceed to our next item on the workshop.
Do you have a question, sir?